The day my sister Rebecca's flawless life began to crumble started like any of her meticulously curated days. She was hosting an extravagant engagement party at her mansion, the very mansion left to her and our parents 5 years ago. Naturally, I wasn't invited. I hadn't been part of her world since the night the accident claimed our parents' lives. I still remember that stormy evening. According to the police, their car lost control on the mountain road and plummeted into the ravine below. Rebecca inherited everything: the family business, the estates, the investments. I received nothing. The will is clear, the family attorney said, avoiding eye contact. Everything goes to Rebecca. I was 23 at the time, fresh out of college, while Rebecca, at 27, was already lauded as a thriving businesswoman, or at least that's what everyone believed. The truth? She had never lifted a finger. Our parents' wealth had paved her path, buying her prestige, her connections, her gilded life. For 5 years, I struggled, juggling 2 jobs and surviving in a cramped apartment on the wrong side of town. Occasionally, Rebecca would spot me at the supermarket or cafe and pretend I didn't exist. Once, when I begged her for help with mounting medical bills, she laughed. "You're pathetic, Sarah," she sneered, sliding on her designer sunglasses. "That's why Mom and Dad left you nothing. They knew you'd squander it, just like you squander everything else." But fate has a way of exposing even the most carefully hidden truths, and Rebecca's perfect world rested on a secret darker than any of us imagined. Everything started to unravel 3 months ago when Detective James Morrison came knocking. Older now, hair streaked with gray and retired, I recognized him immediately. He had led the investigation into our parents' death. "I couldn't sleep," he said, sitting at my tiny kitchen table. "Something about that case never felt right. After retiring last month, I dug deeper. What I found," he slid a thick folder and an old USB across the table. "You need to see this." The footage was grainy but undeniable. It showed Rebecca meeting 2 men in a parking garage 3 days before our parents' accident. Money changed hands. Words were exchanged. And then, chillingly, Rebecca's voice. "Make it look like an accident. I don't care how, just make sure Sarah gets nothing." My world stopped. Coffee spilled from my trembling hands. Detective Morrison's words seemed distant as he explained how he had tracked down one of the men, now dying of cancer in prison, who confessed everything. "Your sister paid them to tamper with your parents' car," he said softly. "She knew they were going to rewrite the will after uncovering her embezzlement and fake credentials. They intended to leave everything to you." I sat frozen as he laid out the evidence: bank transfers, phone logs, witness statements. Rebecca hadn't just inherited our parents' fortune, she had orchestrated their deaths to claim it, and ensured I got nothing. "We can take this to the authorities," Detective Morrison suggested. But I had a different plan. Rebecca's flawless life deserved a fitting, poetic collapse. So here I was, outside her mansion on the day of her engagement celebration, watching luxury cars glide up the driveway. Rebecca had spared no expense: ice sculptures, champagne fountains, a string quartet playing beneath the twinkling garden lights. Her fiancé, Thomas Wellington III, was old money, the kind of marriage that would cement her social dominance. I fingered the USB in my pocket, holding copies of every piece of evidence Detective Morrison had uncovered. Then I adjusted my waitress uniform, a surprisingly easy disguise, and slipped through the service entrance. The party was in full swing. I spotted her immediately, radiant in a designer gown that likely cost more than I earned in a year, draped in our mother's jewels, laughing with her high society friends. She didn't even glance at me as I offered her a tray of champagne. "Thanks," she said, barely acknowledging me, and then Rebecca froze, her face draining of color as if all the blood had been sucked from it. "Sarah? What are you doing here? Are you okay?" Thomas stepped beside her, concern etched into his handsome, old money features, eyes wide and oblivious to the truth about the woman he was about to marry. "Just a minor issue with the staff," Rebecca said quickly, clutching his arm with perfect, manicured fingers. "Actually, I was just about to leave," I said, my voice carrying so the nearest guests could hear. But I think everyone might want to see what Detective Morrison uncovered about the night our parents died. Her champagne glass hit the marble floor with a shattering crash. You're lying, she hissed, but her face had gone ashen, ghostly. Security. Remove her immediately. It was already too late. Detective Morrison walked through the front doors, still radiating authority even in retirement. Behind him were 2 active-duty detectives and the district attorney himself. Rebecca Montgomery, one of the detectives announced, his tone slicing through the stunned silence, "We need to speak with you regarding the events of October 15, 5 years ago." The massive screen set up for a slideshow of Rebecca and Thomas's romance flickered to life, but instead of hearts and flowers, the footage showed Rebecca conspiring with 2 men in that dimly lit parking garage. The guests recoiled in horror. That's not," she stammered, stepping back, mascara running and sweat gleaming on her forehead. "Sarah is lying. She's always envied me, Thomas. You know it." But Thomas had already pulled away, his expression hard and repulsed. Whispers raced through the crowd like wildfire. Rebecca's immaculate life was crumbling before their eyes, just like her shattered champagne glass. "Mrs. Montgomery," Detective Morrison said formally, "I believe it's time to finish our discussion from 5 years ago." The next hours blurred together, statements were taken, guests fled to their cars, and Rebecca's protests grew more frantic with every passing minute. I watched as officers led her away in handcuffs, her makeup streaked with tears, designer gown rumpled from her futile struggles. "I did everything for this family," she screamed. "I earned that money. Sarah was always the favorite. They were going to ruin everything." Thomas stood frozen, the engagement ring he had intended to present still tucked in his pocket. His family's centuries-old fortune was rooted in reputation, and that illusion was crumbling. As Rebecca was placed in the police vehicle, his father pulled him aside, whispering furiously about controlling the damage. But my part wasn't over. Detective Morrison had unearthed more than just her murderous plot. He had uncovered a trail of years-long financial crimes, embezzlement, money laundering, and tax evasion. The evidence was indisputable. "Your parents suspected something," he told me later at the station. 3 months before their deaths, they hired a private investigator. They discovered Rebecca had been stealing from the company for years, faking her credentials, bribing officials. They were devastated. He handed me another file. "This was in your father's private safe. We found it during the renewed investigation. It's a draft of a new will, dated just days before their deaths. They intended to leave everything to you, knowing Rebecca's crimes would be revealed. There's more," Detective Morrison added quietly. He pulled out an envelope, yellowed with age, containing a letter and a small key. "My dearest Sarah," my mother's elegant handwriting began, "if you are reading this, something has befallen us. I have always known you were the stronger one, the one with true integrity. Rebecca, we failed her. We gave her too much and expected too little. This key opens my private safe at First National Bank. Inside, you will find what you need to secure your future, no matter what happens." The safe held a hidden fortune, investments, offshore accounts, properties that Rebecca had no knowledge of. "Your mother was brilliant with finances," Detective Morrison said. "She built a separate empire, independent of your sister's reach. Father's company, and everything else, was now mine." The following weeks were a whirlwind. Rebecca's trial moved quickly, the evidence against her was overwhelming. To avoid the death penalty, she pled guilty and was sentenced to multiple life terms. I attended every session, watching my sister's immaculate facade crumble as the truth came to light. Her social circle evaporated. Thomas's family released a harsh public statement condemning her. The media, which had once celebrated her, now dissected her crimes with relish. Headlines called her Black Widow Harris, the murderous socialite undone by her own sister. The biggest shock came at the asset forfeiture hearing. Not only did I inherit our parents' estate, but all of Rebecca's ill-gotten wealth was seized. After reviewing the draft will and evidence of her manipulations, the judge ordered everything transferred to me, the mansion, the company, every dollar she had stolen. "You can't do this," Rebecca screamed when the verdict was announced. "I built that life. It's mine." Her words were empty echoes in a courtroom filled with truth, just like her soul. "I sold the mansion, it was steeped in too many painful memories. Instead, I moved into a modern downtown penthouse and assumed control of our parents' company. Years of juggling multiple jobs had taught me the value of diligence and honesty. Under my guidance, the business prospered. But I wanted my parents' legacy to mean more than money. I founded the Montgomery Foundation to support victims of financial crimes, assisting families seeking closure. Each year, we funded investigations into cold cases, offering the justice we had finally found. Detective Morrison joined the board, lending his expertise and guidance. "Your parents would be proud," he said during the opening ceremony. "Not just of your success, but of how you're using it to make a difference." I visited Rebecca in prison once. She had aged decades in mere months. Her designer wardrobe replaced with an orange jumpsuit, her hands, once perfectly manicured, now raw and rough. "Was it worth it?" I asked, my voice steady. "All the lies, the murder, the perfect life built on our parents' graves." She looked at me through the glass, her eyes hollow. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I had to be special. I had to be perfect. They were going to take everything from me." "No, Rebecca," I said, turning to leave. "You took it all from yourself." As I walked out, I touched the locket from Mom's safe. Inside was a family photo from happier times. Her greed and envy had poisoned her life, but I kept the locket as a reminder: true wealth isn't measured in money or status, it's in integrity, compassion, and purpose. The company flourished under my leadership, built on honesty and hard work. Thomas reached out months later, apologizing for failing to see through Rebecca's facade. Over time, he became a trusted business partner. Life has a way of placing people where they belong. 5 years after Rebecca's world fell apart, I stood at our parents' graves, placing fresh flowers. The morning dew glittered on the granite like tiny diamonds, more radiant than any jewels Rebecca had ever owned. "We found justice," I whispered, "and I promise your legacy will help others find theirs too." On my way back to the car, I noticed a young woman struggling with heavy grocery bags. I stopped to help her, remembering my own days of hardship. She thanked me warmly, unaware of who I was, or that I was now among the city's wealthiest women. That's the truth about real wealth: it's not mansions, designer clothes, or glamorous parties. It's who you are when no one is watching. Rebecca never understood that. She craved perfection so much, she killed for it, but in the end, she lost everything that truly mattered. Me? I had everything that mattered: integrity, purpose, the ability to make a difference, and, above all, peace. Something her perfect life could never give her. Driving away from the cemetery, the sunrise painted the sky in hopeful shades. Justice may take its time, but it always comes. And when it does, it exposes the truth: the most flawless lives are often built on the darkest lies.